Okay, for this video I want to talk about something slightly different to what I would usually talk about. So recently news came out that there was a fan film that two filmmakers edited together to make Breaking Bad, which is obviously my favourite show of all time. If you know me, you know that. The big poster of Walter White here shows that. I've got my Heisenberg t-shirt on to talk about this. So someone edited Breaking Bad into a 2-hour movie, and I was sort of thinking, how can you possibly do that with 60 hours of such a perfect show? And I actually managed to check it out, so I thought I'd bring my thoughts out about what I think of that. So I'm going to stick on the old Heisenberg hat, and we're going to talk about Breaking Bad, the movie. Now it starts off, this movie, and it's like, it starts off with Heisenberg from the very last season. You know, he's got the big scraggly beard and the hair and everything. And it's like, okay, so I guess they're going to do that backtrack thing where they go back through the events of the show, and they do. It's got like the Heisenberg written on the rundown house. And it actually starts off different to how I thought. It starts off with Walt and Skyler buying the house that we know as the house from Breaking Bad in Albuquerque. And it starts off like that, and it already started off differently to how I imagined it would start off, and that was pretty awesome in itself. But what I really liked about how this movie was done was that it just goes through the core emotional moments, and it makes them stand out as core emotional moments. Maybe not more so than the show, but it really does work in that sense. There are things that don't work with Breaking Bad being a movie, and that's pretty obvious. But I wanted to talk about how well this was done, because it actually surprised me as to how well it was done, because I wasn't expecting it to be, just as gripping as it was. And I love the show, and they do cut out a lot from the show in having it in 2 hours, of course, like I mentioned. Tuco is completely absent, Crazy Eight's completely absent, Skinny Pete, Badger, Lydia, they're all completely out of this movie. None of them are in this movie, and what it does shorten down Jesse's story, and there's not really an emotional impact for Jesse's character in this, which was a shame, because Jesse was my favourite character in the show, and Jesse doesn't play a huge part in this movie version of Breaking Bad. And I sort of thought he'd have more of a presence, but when you actually look at it and you look through moments in the show, you're like, yeah, it is a show about Walter White's transformation. It's not about Jesse's, really. It does become that in the later seasons, but for the most part, it's all about Walter White, and that's what this film is. And if you want to see something that really is just Walter White's story and his transgression from being like Ned Flanders to being a cold-hearted killer, then this is something you should definitely check out. Because if you can't be bothered to watch the show, if you don't know what Breaking Bad is, then, what rock have you been on? Have you been on Mars? But, the show I haven't really given a plot about, but because I thought people would have seen it, but I will give a quick plot. It's basically about a chemistry teacher who, he's just a normal guy. He's an average dude. And he gets diagnosed with lung cancer, and he can't afford the bills because they're like out of the, like, through the roof. It's American, hospitals for you. They'll like charge you till death. So he goes along on a ride along with his brother-in-law Hank Schrader, and he meets Jesse Pinkman and decides, hey, well, he already met Jesse, he was a former student, but he meets up with him and he's like, we should cook crystal meth. And it's just about the building of his empire throughout. And this is really like an empire story. It's like a gangster story, like the way they put it into the movie, but it's just got a twist on it. And that's what I loved about the show. And with this movie, it makes Hank more of the secondary character than Jesse. Like, there are a lot of scenes where there's no Jesse for a long time. And then you see him again, you're like, oh yeah, he is the second main character. He is the secondary protagonist. But it doesn't really focus on that in this show. It's more about Walter and Hank in a way, which is fine. I mean, I like Walter and Hank's dynamic. I like, how their story ends up. But I wanted just a bit more Jesse, and it doesn't have that emotional impact for him. I mean, by the end, you still feel it, but I think you'll know what I mean if you see this. So yeah, there's that. And, it really goes through the events quite quickly. It starts off and immediately I've told you what happens right at the very beginning. If you haven't seen Breaking Bad yet and you want to still watch the show, or you want to just see this because you don't have time, then this will contain spoilers for Breaking Bad, which I didn't think I'd ever have to give a Breaking Bad spoiler warning because it's been out, I think it finished in like 2013 or something, or somewhere along those lines. So I didn't think I'd have to give a spoiler warning, but if you haven't seen it, I guess spoiler warning, you have been warned. But yeah, it really goes through the events really, really well. So Walter White, yeah, like I said, it starts off and it goes through the events quickly. It goes straight from him, the chemistry of change, the study of change thing in the classroom, straight to you have cancer, straight to Ride Along, straight to meeting Jesse, straight to Let's Cook, straight to meeting Saul Goodman. Saul Goodman is introduced very early on, where in the show he's not introduced till like the second or third season. I think it's like halfway through the second season. So immediately we know who Saul Goodman is, and it's like, yeah, this is the lawyer, this is what you're doing, and it goes through it really quickly. But I feel like if this were a movie and not a show for real, then that's how it would play out also. So I don't have any major complaints with that. Some of the editing can be a little jarring, but I'm not blaming it on the editors of this film because it's so well done, and for the scenes that they have to cut out, it's really well done in putting it from scene to scene, and it's not too bad. But immediately, straight after that, we go straight to a montage of them cooking crystal meth in the desert, and then it goes straight onto Walter White is Heisenberg. There's no real origin for Heisenberg apart from what we've seen as him, before he started cooking meth, but there's no origin of the name of Heisenberg, so there's no Tuca, there's no exploding meth, all that is cut out, and it goes straight into, full-on Heisenberg. And with that, some of the development for him is cut out a little bit, because we don't really get the development of him as a villain, whereas in the show it's like he kills Crazy 8, that was his first kill and he was really sad about it, but by the time he kills Jane, he doesn't feel as bad. And both Jane and Crazy 8 are cut out, and that's another bit of Jesse's development that's gone. There are some really good Jesse scenes like there are in the show, but I'm just saying I kind of wanted to see him in that sense, but this is a film about Walter White, so I can't really complain too much about it. So yeah, he is ultimately just straight away a villain. We get introduced to Gus very quickly as well, who is the main antagonist of Breaking Bad as a show. But in this, he's sort of just there because I guess it was felt like he had to be. He does die in the show, but we never actually see his death in the nursing home, and I guess they cut that out because Hector was never a part of this, so it wouldn't have made any sense at all. But just the thoughts I want to give, that's like negatives and positive mixed together. I don't really have any major negatives about this because this is, I guess, a fan film. It's something that two people have put together for us to see and see the progression of Breaking Bad as one solid 2-hour film. And it works. If this were a film in the cinema, I reckon it would be very well received. Everyone would really like it. If the show never existed and it was just this film, I think people would still have that impact when they watch it. The ending doesn't change at all. It's still exactly the same. We see Walter's death. We see Jesse get out of the compound. But I think Uncle Jack and the rest of the neo-Nazis sort of just come out of nowhere because we never get told really who they are in this, which... if that were part of a film, I mean, I know who they are because I've seen the show, but if that were part of a film, I think that would be one of the gripes that people would have with it. So overall, I really liked this edit. I thought it was so well done. I love Breaking Bad. Seeing this, it was just a recap of what I loved about the show, and I reckon if you don't have time and you want to watch Breaking Bad again and you don't have time to do it, check this out, definitely. I think it's been taken off of Vimeo by Sony, which copyright infringement or whatever, which is pretty stupid because it's not people trying to infringe on Breaking Bad, it's just people trying to show us, what it would look like as a movie, and it was done very well. So that's what I loved about this, and I'd say definitely check it out if you're a fan of the show. If you're not and you want to see the show, still check it out. If you don't want to watch 60 hours plus of a show. But anyway, this was very well done, and I really like what they've done with it. I'd be interested in seeing something like this done with like Game of Thrones or something. I don't know how that would work, but I'd be interested in seeing people do that. So if you guys are watching this, I'd be interested in seeing that. So yeah, whoever did this, I'm not entirely sure. I think they remained anonymous. If they've come out, then, well, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, but very well done. And I appreciate that this was made because it's very interesting, and I just wanted to get my thoughts out about what I thought of it as a huge fan of the show. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back very soon.